So it happened again. And this happens several times a month, different wording, but the thrust is usually the same. Hey, wait a second. I've got a will. I thought that meant nobody has to go to probate. That's the whole idea, is the will keeps me out of probate. I did the planning. No, a will means you're going to probate. That's what the whole probate system is set up for. Probate and proof come from the same root word. The probate court is named for the process of probating wills, proving that wills should be followed. Which leads me to today's topic, which is, what's all the fuss about? Welcome to Let's Talk Estate Planning. My name's Jim Miskell. So here's the deal. I appreciate you joining the podcast. The podcast is information and education, hopefully a little bit of entertainment. The issues we talk about are really important, but it does not constitute legal advice. You shouldn't take action on anything you hear in my podcast or anybody else's. That's where meeting with a qualified professional to get legal advice about your situation is really important. So this is the disclaimer. I'm a lawyer. You knew I was going to have a disclaimer. Information and education and hopefully a little entertainment. That's what the podcast is all about. When you need legal advice about your situation, you need to get that from a lawyer representing you. Whether you meet with them virtually or in person, that's the next step. That's my disclaimer. Now back to the podcast. Why are all my working hours consumed with trying to educate people about estate planning? Why do I care? Why is it important? Well, it's important because it makes a difference to the families of my clients. Good planning keeps your family, when grief and crisis strikes, from being tied up and having to go over to the courthouse and wrestle through some administrative process. It keeps them from having to track down doctors to get them to sign legal documents, which they may not be crazy about doing. Good planning lets your family focus on the family. And from the selfish side, what's in it for you? So that's great. That's what's in it for your family. What's in it for you? Good planning is a way to make sure that as the decisions get made, you get what you want instead of somebody else just doing the best they can. Even folks that love you, you don't want them just making it up as they go along. Tell them what you want. My experience is very strongly that families will do what you want them to do, but you got to tell them. You got to tell them they're not mind readers. So that's what all the fuss is about. Folks feel like they know the law and everything's going to be all right if they don't do anything. And it's just not the case. It takes more effort than that. So let's take this, having to be a gentleman this week. Very often it's a lady who said, well, I've got a will, and that's how I know I don't have to go to probate. The probate process, as I said, is all about proving that that will is valid and should be followed. And the folks that get involved in that process and invited into that process are the folks that stand to gain if the will isn't valid. Why? Because they're the folks that would benefit under the state statutes of intestacy. Intestacy means that somebody died without a will. And that means that whatever the state statute is will determine how property is divided. This is another one I hear a lot, along with, hey, I did a will, so that keeps me out of probate. I meet with couples all the time who say, we should have gotten around to this earlier, but our procrastination, it made us feel all warm and fuzzy to know that if one of us died, the other one would inherit everything and could use that money to raise our kids. No problem. Big problem, because that's not what the state statute says. The state statute says if somebody dies, and it varies from state to state, but in Georgia, if somebody dies, their spouse is not the sole heir. If they've got kids, the spouse and the kids inherit equal shares. Spouse never takes less than a third, but what very often happens is you end up with minor kids inheriting part of the house. It's just a whole level of complication. You need to have attorneys appointed as guardian ad litem for the kids that are, and you end up with this crazy co-ownership, and it's really difficult to unwind. From the standpoint of attorneys handling probates, that case is going to generate more fees than a case where things were planned out better. So it ends up being more expensive, and usually the difference in fees far exceeds what planning would have cost. So that's what the fuss is about, is making sure that folks have planning in place so that among other things, more money stays in the family and there's less hassle when unexpected things happen. Hey, Jim Miskell here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. Hope you're enjoying today's content. A lot of times when folks are thinking about this kind of thing, questions spring to mind. If you have questions, we like to do some question and answer episodes. So you can go to our website, letstalkestateplanning.com, and shoot us a message and say, hey, on the podcast, I'd like Jim to cover this on the next question and answer session. Or if it's hitting closer home, especially if you're a Georgia resident, of course, we can't give legal advice on the podcast because it's not specific for your situation. But if you got a situation that you need to handle, it's important to get that done. So letstalkestateplanning.com is how to contact the office. I'd love to talk with you about the specifics of your situation and make sure your estate plan is everything that your family should have it be. In the meantime, we're going to go back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to talk to you soon. So, intestacy, the heirs are the people that inherit there, and they're the people who get sent a copy of the will. You know, it's not like in movies where they say, we're going to read the will, and it's just the beneficiary. The people that are named in the will are all sitting around. No, the people who get the will are the people who would inherit if the will's no good. Sometimes that's the same people who are the beneficiaries under the will. Sometimes it's not. Think about families, blended families, where there are stepkids and they're a new spouse, or a spouse, some joint kids, stepkids from relationships before. The decedent's kids from the prior relationship may have no stake in this particular will. Maybe they inherit when the second spouse dies. Nonetheless, they got a copy of the will. They get asked to sign off and say, yep, court, this is okay, go ahead. They may or may not be real excited about doing that. Is the will going to prevail? In all likelihood, yes. Can they really slow it down if they don't like what's happening? Yes. So again, it's more time, hassle, emotional wear and tear, and cost for the family in a situation like that. So, all right. So the will, you show it to the court, you show it to the heirs if everybody's fine. 30 to 45 days or so later, the court signs an order, and then the executor can go do what the will says to do. And a lot of times you're saying, well, that's cool because my executor is the same person as my power of attorney. And once I die, they'll just be able to keep doing things until they get the order from the court, the letters testamentary from the court. Again, not so. Powers of attorney stop working when you die. So what's the fuss? The fuss is that a lot of folks have an idea. They think they know how things work. The law very often works differently. When the law works differently than what people expect, it's not because people are dumb, but why would you even know this? This is the kind of thing that most families go through just a couple times. And so that's why it's important. That's why the education, so folks can be prepared and spend less time and money with lawyers. So that's what the fuss is all about. That's why we're doing this podcast. Glad you joined me today. As we go through more episodes in the future, we're not just going to tell you how the law works, which a lot of the things may be surprising to you. A lot of them may be exactly the way you expect them to be. But we'll also talk about various options to address these issues, ways that families have been successful in setting up their planning so that that goal that I talked about is achieved. But that's it for Let's Talk Estate Planning today. I'm Jim Miskell. Thanks so much for joining me. Stay tuned in future episodes, and you'll come out of this with a better appreciation for estate planning, and your family will be glad you did, because once you get educated, you're going to move forward to make sure that your family's plan is in place.